During the 1970s and early 1980s, there was a lot of video games that came out in the arcade scene that ended up being real trendsetters and helped push the video game industry forward, as we saw a lot of big classic games released during this time stretch. And it's been kind of known to be the golden years of the arcade scene, as again, there was a lot of games that came out that became huge hits, and to some extent, some of them even still go on to this day, and also help establish certain companies that started laying the groundwork here for the video game industry. Companies like, let's see, like Namco, and let's see, who was else? Like, well, Atari, they're kind of still around, and but a lot of them were really, or even developers as the years went on, were inspired by a lot of these companies here, and so it started introducing like a lot of competitive gameplay, as the arcade scene back then was just filled with a lot of people, lining up to play these arcade games on these arcade cabinets. A lot of them being multiplayer, and it was just a lot of fun. It was definitely uh, a different time where it was more playing with someone right next to you, and that definitely amped up the competitive nature of a lot of these games, I feel, and just made it really fun. As I remember going back into the arcades in those days, and just the kind of like a dimly lit place, but then you can just see all the flashing colors coming from the arcade cabinets, and all the loud booming sounds, and all the odd little electric sounds coming out from these arcade cabinets. And, to this day, it's probably one of the sounds that whenever I hear like arcade game sounds from like this generation and all, as obnoxious as it might sound to some people, right? Just because it's, all the loud kind of like, electronic sounds and all. For me, it's just strangely nostalgic and almost like white noise to me. And it's just really, I don't know, it just kind of gives me a certain sense of peace and all, just reminding me a lot of those days there. But yeah, a lot of these games are really fun though, and they're still a blast to play through even to this day. And so I wanted to highlight 10 games here from this stretch that I feel are probably some of my more favorite games from this time frame in the arcades. I didn't really organize them like exactly, from, I have 10 of them, but I'm not putting them in any specific order, but thought I'd share these here to at least give you a little bit of nostalgia for those that were around during that time. Or if you weren't, maybe this will give you a little glimpse of video game history. So again, not really ranking them in any order, but the first one I have here on the list is for Donkey Kong. And so this game is just a lot of fun, where you control Jumpman, who we would later know to be Mario, and as he climbs his way up to the top of this tower to try to save Pauline, who is not Princess Peach. And all along the way, you're trying to avoid like barrels and fireballs also. And as the levels go on, it definitely gets a lot challenging, but it's still a lot of fun to play too, and can be really addictive, just to try to keep mastering each level. And next up is Dig Dug. This game is just a lot of fun, where the premise is where you're this guy with a sort of like an inflatable sort of gun thing that you have, and you're just digging your way through the dirt there and trying to inflate these enemies until they pop, and once you get them all, or they all escape off the screen, you advance over to the next level. And so again, a lot of the fun in this game is just a challenge that it comes with, as you're trying to stay alive as they're trying to chase you down. But just a really fast gameplay, as the levels speed up as you go on, just makes it really fun to play. Next up is Frogger. You control this frog as you try to cross a street and this stream to get yourself across, so that you can find yourself a safe spot as you're trying to avoid getting squashed from cars, and eventually not fall into the deep water there as you're trying to traverse over turtles' backs and logs. And again, the simple concept of this game just makes it really entertaining though, as it just can be pretty difficult to maneuver yourself through these hazards here on the screen there, but just makes for a lot of fun though. This is Breakout. Kind of like Pong, where you have a basically just a rectangle shape there at the bottom and you're bouncing this ball up, but this time you're trying to break a lot of blocks on the top of the screen, and the more you end up breaking, the higher your score. And eventually, though, depending on the angle that you hit the ball, it can start coming back a lot quicker, making it difficult to keep track of it. So very simple in concept, but difficult to master, and that's what makes this game and a lot of the games from this generation just a lot of fun. An all-time classic is Space Invaders. This game here, you find yourself as a ship at the bottom of the screen as you're shooting up to try to stop the alien invasion coming down towards you. You have a few barriers there to try to help you hide behind the enemy shots, as otherwise they start coming down, and eventually it'll be game over if you can't quite get to them all. Very fun, and the gameplay gets pretty tense as you're trying to keep up with shooting all the aliens. And so, simple concept, but just was definitely a big hit back in the day, as this game spawned a lot of like tournaments and all that people would compete in, and just made for a really fun time in the arcades. In Crystal Castle, you control Bentley the Bear as you go around collecting these jewels on the ground and trying to get away from the enemies that are trying to chase you down in this kind of cool isometric sort of perspective that this game has. And I always thought that the 3D mazes and all were pretty cool on this. One thing that this game reminds me of, and for some reason it kind of creeps me out though, as much as I do like the game, is that if you've ever been a fan of the movie The Shining, doesn't Bentley the Bear kind of look like that one specific bear that appears in a certain scene in that messed up movie? I don't know. What do you think? Tempest is one of my favorite games of this generation of arcade games here, where, again, another simple concept, but you're controlling the spaceship as you rotate it around this grid to stop the enemy from coming in towards you. Really cool 3D effects for the time, and as you advance more into the stage, the layouts get a little bit more complex as do the enemy patterns, but just the whole time you're having a lot of fun playing this. Next up on the list is I have Dragon's Lair. So this game was pretty revolutionary back then as far as what we were seeing on screen, as it's basically a cartoon done by the wonderful Don Bluth animation studios, and just really great animation, really great character designs, and overall just a cool setting that they created with this game here. But ultimately, it is just a QTE game where it's just quick time events as you're just following a command on screen. But it was a bit challenging to try to get the inputs in correctly. And ultimately, other than that, there's not a whole lot of gameplay, but it was a lot of fun to watch though on the screen. Considered by many to be the first video game, and this is Pong. Well, technically not 100% correct. You can say that this is probably the first commercially successful video game that was out there, where it was a game that was put in the arcades and then also eventually versions of it came out on home consoles. I mean, the first generation of video game consoles is pretty much just Pong clones. But the simple concept of just bouncing this ball back and forth between these two, just basically white straight lines, just makes it really fun. It actually can be really enjoyable with two players on it, as it can get pretty competitive. As basically, it's sort of like a game of table tennis in a way. Simple concept, and definitely started the whole revolution of video games, though. Miss Pac-Man was a follow-up to the original Pac-Man and expanded on the original game by giving a few new features, like being able to warp through some tunnels and also fruit that kind of floats around the scene instead of just being static there on the screen, and also with different enemy patterns on the ghosts there. Just a very fun game, and definitely one of the first mascots of its time, where the original Pac-Man and Miss Pac-Man ended up becoming a staple in the video game industry for years to come. But that's what I got here for my top 10 favorite games from this generation. Let me know what some of your favorites are, and hopefully you enjoyed this little trip down nostalgia lane, and I'll see you in the next.